Hey everybody, Scott Burnside here for another edition of the Suitcase and the Scribe. Mike McKenna, I'm pleased to report you continue to move. I can't remember where you were last week when we were setting up free agency. I think you were in the Adirondacks. Now you're in Maine, and you tell me that you are a short canoe ride to the ocean. I think that's so cool, and it's a place you know pretty well.
Yeah, I love it here in Maine. I mean, I played 3 seasons worth with the Portland Pirates, the now defunct American Hockey League team. And I did it with 3 different affiliates, which I'm not sure anybody else has that record. But the first time we came was 2007, 8. So it was my third year pro. And it kind of like laid the groundwork. I really fell in love with this area and thought, man, it'd be cool to play here again. And then I ended up getting another 2 years, thought I was going to get a third year in a row. And just, man, this vibe is awesome in the city in Portland, Maine. Like, it's like a little Boston, but super laid back, and the food's amazing, and the water's right there. And like you said, like where we're staying and where we lived when I played here was right on a river that goes up and down with the tide. If I hopped in a canoe at the right time of the day, tide would take me right out to the ocean. I'd be with the liners out there. So it's cool, man. Like, this is, Scott, I'm kind of getting the feeling for what it's like to be able to do things in life and not just be a hockey player and have your standard 1 week vacation in the summer and then back to training. Like, I mean, is this something within media? You must have transitioned to this at some point thinking like, wow, we actually get a bit of time off in the summer. Like, there's that month window, it seems like. Is it true where like things really do shut down completely?
Yeah, that's very true. And although I always felt, and maybe certainly COVID hasn't helped, and the disruption to the schedules and stuff I've often felt that it was like the off season became even more and more truncated. But there is a period of time, and I'm sure certainly the players get to get away, and there's that decompression time. And but even talking to coaches and GMs, executives who, they're still on the clock. Lots of executives are on the clock, right? Nazem Kadri's out there, John Klingberg's out there, Nino Niederreiter. What are you doing with what little cap space you have left? And here we are. We're, by the time we do the final podcast of the season next week, we're going to be the last week of July, and so now you're starting to think about training camp and all those things. But there is a period in August where things sort of go dark, and it's it's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling to decompress and to just to feel that way. So I'm curious though, because I spent last week at the development camp in Nashville. I was doing some content for the Predators, and when as a player, because it was exciting to watch them, and then you're like, wait a minute, it's the middle of July. Let's not get too excited about 18, 19-year-olds, even as good as they look. As a player, when did you start to build? Like, what was your August like? Like, could you, when would you get back at it? Like, when did you feel, okay, whatever downtime I've had, that's enough. I need to be doing stuff. Or did you ever fully get away from it?
It really morphed over my career. Early on, I felt like there was still a lot of growth in my game that needed to happen. And so I was on the ice at a decent amount. And of course, I fell victim to the normal line of thinking that you got to stay with it. You're going to forget how to do it if you don't. You got to skate. And I think it was counterproductive because I'd be playing in these summer leagues in the St. Louis area where it turns into nothing but 2-on-1s and backdoors. And for a goaltender, it doesn't help you. Like, you fall into really bad habits.
Yeah.
And so I started to kind of pick and choose, and I would always by at least middle August start to skate a lot. And most of the time that was with the Blues. They needed goaltenders, and I was a local guy available playing pro, so I would skate with them often in the lead up to training camp, which was amazing. But I think after one really bad year, things changed for me. I had a terrible year in Binghamton, New York. And I don't mean as like the city of or the team I played on. We all got along. We were bad. And so, I realized this is how much everything blended together in my life. The bad year was in Albany. Okay. It was the year before Binghamton. We finished last 2 years in a row, but in different cities. That's what I was remembering. So miserable year in Albany. And straight up, Scott, I didn't think I was going to get another contract. Like, I thought I was done. And this was probably after 7th, 8th year pro. I don't know what it was, 6th, 7th. And I just went like, man, I got to get away from this gear. And I put it in the garage for 3 months and didn't touch it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I went and just did other things. Like I just went to the gym, and trained and did other stuff. And I'll tell you what, man, like I found out it really only took me about 2 weeks to get back into like my tracking and my movements, the actual goalie aspects.
Yeah.
It took me about 2 weeks to hone in, and everything else came along with it. And of course I did go and do some goalie skating, like leading up to it. But it refreshed me.
Yeah.
And I pretty much stuck to that from then on in my career, that I really wouldn't get back on the ice until August at least. And I would just do other things to keep going. And then by August, I'd go and I'd do my specific goalie training, and I would continue to skate with the Blues. But man, it saved my career in a lot of ways, because it was too much. And a lot of kids just fall victim to that, Scott. So it's tough. And it's nice though when you can do it at home, like when you can train there. I feel bad for those that can't, that they don't have anywhere to go to train. Like,
right. Well, you have to make you have to travel, you have to make arrangements, you have to travel, you have to, did you ever do, like you talk about goalie training and whatever point in the summer, like, did you go to like goalie, not camps? I'm trying to think, because there used to be one in Wisconsin, right? I remember talking to Brian Elliott. That was a big one. Say. Would you go to like those sort of goalie gatherings? And how do you find out about that stuff? Because it strikes me as, you got to make a commitment to do it. And maybe it's important, or maybe you don't want to be around other goalies. I don't know.
Oh, so I love being around goalies. Goalie is still my passion. It always was. And you're fully aware of that. But I would, as a kid, I just went to local goalie camps.
Yeah.
And that was fine, but when I got to college, after I was drafted, that's when Mitch Korn grabbed me and he goes, "You're a big man, but you can't skate. And you need to go see my friend Chris Economo in Buffalo, New York." Well, I went to see Econ, and that was 2 weeks of hell on earth. No pucks, just skating, goalie skating. And I did that it was miserable. But we also had a ton of fun, and there were some legit, really good prospects there, and people that pushed me, like, goalies like Shane Connolly and Matt DiGirolamo, and like some of these guys you probably haven't heard of, but they were unbelievable youth hockey goalies and played D1 college hockey. And they could do things on their skates at 14 that I wasn't even touching at 19, 20.
Yeah. And
that pushed me. And so I'd go train with Econ those, I don't know, it was 4 or 5, 6 summers. We called it Econ Skate. And then I would continue to go see him after that. And then I would just do one-on-one time with skating and shots and everything else. But so yeah, I actually would go to these goalie combines, but it was a tight group, and it was a very much invite only thing, which was really cool, man. Like, and Econ's like the closest to friends now. I'll see him next week when I travel yet again for the fantasy hockey draft of a league that I'm in that centers around goaltending. Shockingly, Scott. So
wait a minute, you're in a pool that drafts only goaltenders? I want in. I'm in for all the pools. So
it's goalie heavy. I'll put it that way. It's very weighted towards goaltending, and everybody in this fantasy hockey league has ties to a person that we're all friends with that kind of mentored all of us. So it's pretty special, man. It's the EKHL, and we take things seriously. So yeah, well, but I mean, but what I've learned from it is I get to play like manager, dude. Like, and I mean, Scott, there's no shortage of the managers right now around the league.
Yeah. So
you said it, like, they're not done yet, are they?
Well, so let me ask you this: if you had to take over the role of one team right now as a GM, how would you like to be the GM of the Calgary Flames? And I think the world of Brad Treliving, because I think he's got such a great personality. He's easy to deal with. He's a guy that I just think is a good, honest person. And, he's built this team. I mean, how often did we talk in the lead up to the playoffs and down the stretch that Calgary, was built the right way. And under Daryl Sutter, they had become this team that was a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. And yeah, they knuckled against Edmonton in the second round. Wasn't great for them. But still a really good team, well put together in a great city. And then Johnny Gaudreau, I mean, talk about it a million times. And again, I still am gobsmacked that he is a Columbus Blue Jacket. Great for Jarmo Kekalainen, great for those fans. And now, team elected arbitration with Matthew Tkachuk, a restricted free agent. And now, I've got a piece that I filed this morning. I talked to an agent, a couple of executives. I haven't talked to anyone who believes in their heart of hearts, don't worry, Matthew Tkachuk is going to sign a long-term deal in Calgary. Everyone I've talked to is like, don't see it. They believe that the die is cast and Matthew Tkachuk is going to, whether it's this week or next week or, however the Flames handle it, he's going to end up on a 1-year deal with pending UFA status a year from now, and he's gone. And so the Flames cannot have what happened to them with Johnny Gaudreau happen twice in a row with Matthew Tkachuk. I know I asked you a question and now I'm still talking, but it is a bit calamitous in Calgary. Do you think that's fair?
Sure. I don't feel bad for general managers very often. Okay. Like that's
fair.
I just don't, man. Like it's a high stakes position that shit happens,
Yeah.
Brent Treliving did everything he could and came up and just, couldn't pull it off with Gaudreau. It just it shows that money really isn't everything. Like you can't just throw money at people and make them stay. Like we talked about this before. It's all about gut feeling, man. And bottom line is Gaudreau just didn't want to play in Calgary any longer and he wanted to be closer to home. That's as simple as that. And I mean, it probably surprises that he went to Columbus, but it's an hour flight away from his home in Jersey, whatever. I mean, the border is real. The civil liberties available in the United States and the freedoms sometimes are a little bit different and more. And when you've gone through COVID and everything else, like Scott, there's still a lingering thought to players that they still may end up having to go into bubbles someday, or maybe things will revert back. Like it's a real risk to be in Canada if you are American, especially.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that this factors in with Matthew Tkachuk as well, that this is an American kid from St. Louis, Missouri. Yeah. This isn't Nazem Kadri from Toronto, who could probably sign a ticket in Calgary and be fine with it because he's Canadian and you guys are used to it, right? Like it's not a big deal. I think that factors into Tkachuk more than anything else as well, is that your nationality does matter. It does make you more accepting to things, right? Yeah. Like how many Americans end up staying in Canada when they're done playing? It happens, but it's not the same extent as the other way. So I think that Treliving's he's in a tough spot, man. Like he went for it last year, which he should have. That team was built. And oddly enough, we thought they could play any style. We thought they'd be fast enough, and they weren't fast enough. And they lost their structure and tried to play a different style than what was really their bread and butter for a lot of it. They just tried to go up and down the ice. So I think it's tough because, and we've said this all along too, and I don't want to throw gas on the fire with it, but I always wonder if you look at the long term and think, man, do I really want to play for Darryl a couple more years? This has been kind of tough, even though we've gotten the best out of us.
Yeah.
So, it's a tough spot for Treliving and the Flames because Scott, you outlined it. Like, what are some of the things within your piece that that really came across as the difficulties for players in a Calgary or even in other Canadian or smaller markets?
Yeah, it was interesting. I talked to a longtime agent who he knows whereof he speaks, and he called it death by 1,000 cuts, and it's it's not the same in all 7 Canadian markets, but there are certain the tax rate in Canada is completely different, and now it's not the same across the United States. As I talked to another executive who said, well, taxes are high in New York and California. But yes, and they're high in Canada, and the climate for some communities, and there is a sense of remoteness. God bless people who go to Winnipeg and want to be there and thrive there. But that city's different than any other city in the NHL. It just is, and so it's not everyone's cup of tea. You do have the COVID. You just have all kinds of things, the climate, and whether it's in Edmonton or Winnipeg, and it's a real thing. And this agent said, you know what, and the media. So I'm going to ask you about that too, because both sides, having played with, have been in part of Canadian organizations, and you spent a lot of time in the States, obviously, and the media is part of it, right? I mean, the media is different in most Canadian cities than it is in most American cities. And it's a real thing. This agent said to me, and he's like, listen, it just is. If you can play somewhere, maybe it's Nashville, maybe it's Tampa, maybe it's Dallas, tax structure is different there. The media is not as demanding. So your lifestyle is different. Why wouldn't you go there? And then this other executive I talked to said, I mean, there are all these different, the 1,000 cut things. And then it mitigates it if you have electrifying players with whom to play. So it's a little different now with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in Edmonton, although still Edmonton it's a struggle to get people to go there in some ways. Mm-hmm. Toronto with Austin Matthews, Toronto's a different city. But this agent said, if you're not close to winning and you factor all that other stuff in, he said, I have a lot of Canadian clients who are like, find me a place to play in the States. Mm-hmm. Again, you just, it's the whole package. And I guess the bottom line is it becomes even more difficult for even the best run organizations in Canada to achieve the ultimate success. And when we talk every single year, we talk about, is this year? It's been 1993. That was a long time ago that a Canadian team won a Stanley Cup. They had the best chance, of course, during the realignment with the Canadian division because of COVID. And, the Canadians got waxed by Tampa. So let me ask you this question. Is there a Canadian team you're like, no, I really think this team could win a cup in the next 2 or 3 years, next couple of years? Do you have a Canadian team you're like, no, I would put money on them?
I mean, I don't think you can count out Toronto.
Yeah,
I don't. I mean, their goaltending is a whole another story right now, but there's still a chance that those reclamation projects could work. Yep. And they're still a piece or two away. Vancouver's a middling team that's, new regime. Edmonton though is a team that maybe they could pull this off, man. Like if you get consistent goaltending from Campbell, if you can still play that Woodcroft style, it's a little more buttoned up and still let Connor go hog wild out there. Yeah. Edmonton could, but like Calgary's going to fall off big time. I don't see them replacing what they're going to lose. Not really. I mean, Ottawa, who knows? Like there's just question marks, it shows though the ebb and flow to Canadian teams can be different than some of the American clubs, at least in different markets, because it is really difficult to get free agents. And with that being the case, it shows you how the importance of drafting and developing from within. Like if you're a Canadian team, you better bank on drafting and developing unbelievably well and getting those players until they're 28 or 9, because that's about the runway you have before they go off to greener pastures somewhere in the United States. That's just kind of how it works, man.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's not impossible, but like fans that get pissed off about players not wanting to come to Canada or not wanting to play in Canada, like look in the mirror. You guys are terrible to them. Like on social, everywhere. Like, first day of training camp, Mikko Koskinen comes in and he gets asked a question. Nobody wants you here. What's it feel like in the room? Like, oh my God. Like, how do you handle
You don't
that?
think that's happening? You don't think that's happening in Nashville or Columbus or Dallas?
No, it's not happening there. I mean, it might happen to you in Philly, but it just doesn't. And those pressures, whether people I don't know if people realize how hard that is. Like, why would you sign up for that if you could avoid it, right? If it's your best option, you take it, whatever. Some people are strong-willed, you can do it. But like, look at the Jake Gardners of the world. They're just like, dude, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like straight to Carolina, everything's good. Let me get out and thrive. Freddie Anderson, same way. Like,
yeah,
it's, and I hate that because I love Canada, man, but it's just reality.
So I'm curious, time, no, it wasn't, you didn't spend a long chunk of time with Canadian organizations, but when you were there, because Ottawa and Vancouver, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah. Vancouver for 2 days, but Ottawa, for almost half a season.
You did probably get the 2-day effect, but did you get even, in those, given your experiences and whether you were with a Canadian team or just around because you saw it happen, like how different is it if you are playing in a Canadian market than, let's talk, Jersey or Dallas or Tampa and places that Columbus, places that you also know?
Noticeably different. You know, I mean, I went to Canadian Tire because I had a flat on the back of my Pathfinder, and it was like, clear the runway because this guy needs it fixed, you know, and I had never met anybody in there. And I was like, no, dude, I can wait here just like everybody else. It's no problem. Like, you can't go anywhere. You know, you are noticed. You are noticeable. You're a public figure. You have to be on at all times. You can't let yourself down, your guard down at all. And some people are fine with that. I actually really enjoyed it. Like, I really liked playing in Ottawa. Like, I mean, well, we didn't, what fans we had in the building, but there were more fans that watched. They weren't willing to come to the building, but able to watch. And I love the passion. I love that everybody seems invested. But what comes with that also is a whole lot of armchair quarterbacking, because everybody, Canadian folks, to me, your everyday Canadian that doesn't really know that much about hockey looks down upon Americans of not knowing hockey.
Yeah.
Your everyday Canadian, right? That's just a casual fan. It's by birthright you know more about hockey. And that's really not true.
Yeah.
Right. And that can go both ways, dude. Like, we're like that with baseball or football. It's the same thing. And from American standpoint. But that can come across kind of tough for players in some play. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was fun playing there because it's the birthplace of hockey to me. It's the home of hockey. It's just, it was a fun environment. But I think if I had my choice for something, it'd be tough, especially as a goalie. Like, man, I never had to make those hard decisions. It wasn't good enough.
So I want to ask a question before we move on, talk about some other free agents and stuff. So one of the things that, you know, the interesting part, Toronto, this agent I talked to said, you know, in some ways, Toronto's somewhat immune, huge city. You know, it's one of the greats, you know, it's Toronto. But 2 years from now, Austin Matthews, he's under contract through 2023-24. And like never, I mean, as big and as important as Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk are to Calgary, and, you know, we've talked for months and months about JT Miller in Vancouver, who seems destined to return to the States and either the East or the South. Can you imagine what happens if Austin Matthews says, I can stay, but I'm going to need 20%? That's what this agent said to me. He says, I think he goes, but in part because he may be looking for that 20%, which is the maximum of the salary cap that any one player can command. And do you
realize I didn't even know that was a rule? I didn't even know there was a 20% rule in hockey.
Yeah. And well, no one gets to it because of the cap, right? So, but I'm curious, because I know the fans in Toronto and the media there they'll handle this very, you know, very casually. Okay, it's your decision. No, I don't think that.
I think they'll handle it very poorly. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm fascinated because that's the real, you know, again, the point of this is no one wants to stay in Canada. Brady Tkachuk he's signed a long-term deal in Ottawa, right? So maybe Matthew changes his mind. I don't know.
Well, and there's a team that's locking people up in Ottawa, man. They've done a good job of that. They now have young talent that's committing. Josh Norris, Thomas Chabot, Brady Tkachuk,
maybe they're the anti-Canadian team in the Canadian capital. But can you imagine what happens if Austin Matthews, as is his right, says, I'm not locking down here, which would then force the Leafs to look at trading him sometime during the, you know, a year from now, right? Heading into his contract year. Just imagine what that would be like.
That'd be seismic. That would really, you know, Johnny Gaudreau is one hell of a hockey player. And I mean, a top 10 player in the league, a top, you know, 15 player consistently with a mega year this year that put him into the MVP talks.
For sure.
But he's not Austin Matthews, right? Like, this is a generational talent and goal scorer and
our trophy winner.
This test. That's right. And 60 goals. Like, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion he goes to Arizona. Okay. Like everybody thinks, because just look at Gaudreau. He ended up in Columbus, you know, but I do think things are a little different for Austin.
True.
And I will say this though, man, like, winning still does matter. And that team in Toronto is still really solid, and they should be solid. if he wins a cup, if they go deep, it really helps to me. It helps to cement a bit because, like you said, Toronto still is that major metropolitan area. It's a sexy city. It's got everything you could ever want. It's never been a place that really Americans have shied away from, it seems like, in terms of, in terms of dollars or perception. It's really just like whether you want to play there or not.
Well, John Tavares makes that, Tavares makes the choice and goes, it's still
desirable, 100%. It's still the Leafs. But I don't know, man. I could easily see Matthews going, and then there's always that cascade effect because you need the big player to believe in, and that's what everybody in Calgary is afraid of. Okay, well, Gaudreau went. Geez, Tkachuk must be going now.
Yeah.
When in reality, it freed up a lot of cap space, so maybe they can't keep Tkachuk. But it's just always about money here. It's what we find,
All right, we're going to take a brief break here, as always, to remind people, our listeners, that DoorDash is the proud sponsor of the Nation Network of podcasts, restaurants, and more delivered right to your door. Are you doing any, do you do DoorDash on vacation? Can you get a DoorDash to your riverfront retreat in Maine, or do you do that?
On this trip, Scott, as loyal as I am to DoorDash, it didn't need to happen. I've been surrounded by good food the whole time I've gotten here. And yes, I've eaten shockingly lobster. So yeah, it is available. I looked at the app the one night because I thought we were in a pinch. And then it turned out there was a seafood shack right down the street that was able to help us out. So yeah, it was good.
Good. All right. So here we are. A week ago, you and I were chatting. I was in Nashville. We did the show, the free agent show. It was outstanding. It was a ton of fun. Are you like a week later, do you feel a bit wrung out? Like when you think, are you surprised that we're still waiting on Nazem Kadri? Are you surprised that we're still waiting on John Klingberg? Or is this, it seems like every summer there's one or two that just sort of outliers. Maybe they're so zen about their futures. It's okay if they wait. Obviously the fear is if you don't get in the first hour or two, it was a week ago on Wednesday, usually it's July 1st, the money runs out because there's a finite amount of it. But maybe guys like Kadri and John Klingberg are like, I'll just wait and figure something out. We'll see what happens.
That would be my first question to the player and the agent. And I don't know if you would get an honest answer. The question would be, was this stall tactic intentional?
Yeah.
And I doubt you'd ever get the real answer on this. Because if you're stalling on purpose, that would be surprising. Mm-hmm. Maybe they are. Maybe they're trying to play cleanup and you get teams that are desperate that have a bit of space. But I don't know, man. I thought Kadri would be a first day bidding more gone.
Yeah.
And Klingberg, everybody needs a right shot D and he'd fit great in all these places. Well, those doors start to close very quickly.
Yeah.
And you saw it with Malkin. I don't have any other way to say this for Gino, but Gino straight up went out to the market and kind of came back with his tail between his legs and realized it's not as rosy out there as he thinks it might be. Sometimes your own perception of yourself may not be right, especially when you've never had to face that type of decision, right? I had to face that every single year. So I knew what my marketplace was immediately. And I knew that first contract across the table, it might be the last one and I'm taking it.
Right.
I have to wonder for Kadri or Klingberg if there were offers that they went, nah, it's not good enough for me.
Yeah.
And now you look back at it and think, oh, maybe I should have taken that, because now you're circling back. And imagine if Kadri ends up back in Colorado, it turns into, well, I looked around all the market and I couldn't get anything else. So here I am again, guys, which everybody would be happy to have him back and all that. But it'd be a good bit of poker by Colorado in the first place. But Scott, don't you get that impression that sometimes, players just truly don't quite see what the marketplace really may be, or maybe their agents, pushing a little harder than they think, and they get caught out like this. This is how value contracts happen for teams, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And I think it's, maybe is it misreading the market, or is the market unreadable? Maybe
that's a fair point.
Maybe it's, I've talked to players in the past who have been like, I got some bad advice, right? I got my guy was saying, hey, go here, do this. And where he really wanted to go while he was doing that other stuff, his dream spot went to someone else. And I, had a conversation where he's like, I wish that hadn't happened. And you're like, okay. But the agent's job is to leverage his, the best spot, the best situation, dollar term, all the things that a player is demanding of the agent. And maybe you demand something that the market can't deliver. And Mike, I think and again, I don't know because I haven't talked to John, or I don't know what Nazem Kadri's situation is, but were there offers or were there discussions early on that, the thinking was, we're not going to rush into this because we want to see what's out there. And then all of a sudden it was like, what's out there is not as enticing. And, again, hard to drum up, both John Klingberg and Nazem Kadri are elite players. They're going to get paid well, maybe not as much as they wanted or the term that they'd like. So temper the empathy here, but it is interesting to me that both those guys are still out there. Because you and I talked, and I think we were of the same mind. I like John Klingberg in Carolina, and of course, Brent Burns ends up there on a deal that, that's a good deal for Carolina.
It's a really good trade for Carolina. Good deal,
right? It's not,
and it's good for Brent Burns.
And it's good for Brent Burns. And you and I
think down in that 5'6" role. He doesn't have to carry the mail. Just clap one-timers all day long,
all day long. Just pound the bus.
Smart biz by Carolina.
And I know you liked the idea of John Klingberg in Seattle, but Justin Schultz is there.
What's Seattle doing?
I don't know exactly.
I mean, come on, Ron, spend some dollars here, man.
I like Justin Schultz. And there's a guy, here's an interesting thing. I'm not to go down the rabbit hole totally. Do you remember when Justin Schultz was in Edmonton? And
I remember when he was in Oklahoma City.
The fans crushed him in Edmonton. They booed him. I remember talking to him. He got to Pittsburgh. I don't know. I'm trying to think how many. I have to look and see how many cups he won there. But Justin Schultz was literally driven out. And I remember talking to him because he's a very, very low key guy, and he's like, "Yeah, that was hard, right? Like that was a hard thing." And then he ended up rediscovering his career. So I'm not saying I'm not down on Justin Schultz, but at this stage, I think John Klingberg looks better in your Seattle lineup than Justin Schultz does. That would be what I would say.
Yeah. I remember Schultz in Oklahoma City. He had like the best year going for a defender in the American League ever. This was the lockout year, 12-13 and stuff. So that was when I was with Peoria, and we had players like Jake Allen, Jaden Schwartz, Ian Cole. Like we had some damn good hockey players, and Schultz just crushed. Like every power play, it's going in the net. Felt like puck to him, and then it just didn't transfer in Edmonton. Edmonton from that era had so many players that didn't transfer. Like I can't pinpoint exactly because I wasn't in their organization why they sucked at developing, but boy, they sucked at it. They had some really high picks and players that were really good that just it didn't work out there. And that's the way it was. But I thought that for sure Seattle would make a splash with somebody. And not to just make a splash, like to legit make that team better, Scott. And they got good players. Like they signed good players. Great. But at some point, you got to get the legitimacy of your franchise with somebody you can sell some tickets for and put a nameplate on a jersey and get people to be excited about. Because right now the team doesn't have anybody special in that lineup that's going to bring people to their feet, man. Like it's just as is, right? Benier's right. They're coming. I get it. They're coming. Beniers, I apologize. But yeah, it's still a ways away for that to really sink in. So I don't know, just surprised me a bit. The whole Klingberg back to Dallas thing was just, I was infatuated with that storyline. It's too bad it didn't happen.
Well, so here's it. What about Nazem Kadri in Seattle? Like they got some money. Like that's, anyway, I'm curious to see where Nazem Kadri ends up. I know this sort of notion of, anyway, the Islanders are another team that has really been eerily quiet this offseason.
Kadri is so good. He is everything a team wants.
You can go anywhere. There is, like,
Yes.
you and I could do an entire show listing every single one of the 32 teams. That would there be one or two you're like, nah, maybe that doesn't fit there, but probably only that. Like that's how good he
Wild,
is.
isn't it? Like, what about? And when I was looking through free agents today, the one that really caught my eye was Niederreiter. He's such a glue piece and an important checker, score, you name it. He kind of does everything, right? And he's played really well for Carolina. And I think he's kind of gotten cap crunched out because he's in that middle class tier where you're going to be somewhere between, I don't know what his next deal will look like, but $4 to $6 million, right? In that range. He made 5.25 last year. Like, I'm surprised somebody didn't snatch him up right away. You see Eric Goodbranson go first day, bang, big deal. And
that was a lot for Eric Goodbranson.
I know, but this is like, that's a D. Niederreiter's a forward. I get that that's different, but it's so funny how the market can pick and choose first and second day winners by perception. And now you got someone like a Niederreiter and Kadri, Klingberg, even like Paul Stastny's still out there who's puts up serviceable points. Like, they're just chilling, I guess, dude. Everybody else wants to go on vacation. So.
I know. Well, and that's the thing, right? I talked to somebody from one of the teams. I said, what about your GM? Oh, he's out.
It's at the lake. It's at the cottage.
But Nino, as you know, I spent a lot of time in Carolina this year, and Nino Niederreiter had 24 goals. He played almost exclusively with Jordan Staal and Jesper Fast. The line was incredible, right? They complete shutdown line, generated offense. Jordan Staal got really going in the latter quarter of the regular season. It was a really good line. Here's the issue, I think. And I know that Nino Niederreiter's agent was hoping to lock something up before the playoffs. The problem is that he has struggled in the playoffs to be the big man that he has been during the regular season. He got 4 goals in 14 games. Mm-hmm. I think he got 2 in game 1 against Boston. That's my guess, is that, and now, Carolina's got Max Pacioretty. They've got a couple of RFAs, and, there's a lot of moving parts in Carolina. And you're right. I mean, he's a 24 goal guy. Who does not want a 24 goal power forward? Yes.
Yeah.
And he's a good guy. He's a really good guy. So
happy for Pacioretty to go somewhere. They got him for nothing in Carolina. That's unbelievable. The shedding that continues from Vegas, what they've given up for nothing, is a whole nother story. But I want to ask you about the San Jose Sharks. This team is, to me, they were an absolute mess, completely no guide to that team whatsoever all season long. And I think realistically, it probably just stemmed from not having management in place. But this has also been kind of years in the making, with several bad contracts and very poor drafting developing. There's no way around that. Really poor. And Doug Wilson's son was one of the heads of scouting, and he's not there. He's been relieved of duty now, and Mike Greer comes in as the new general manager. There's still a coach to be hired. What's your sense on where San Jose's at, what they're up to, rumblings of where that franchise may be headed, especially having moved Burns out?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, because they're a franchise that literally from the time they came into the NHL, they were the model of consistency, right? Mm-hmm. They never won a Stanley Cup, but every year was a competitive force, and it's people wanted to play there. It didn't matter who was, you go back to Daryl Sutter days coaching there, and Pete DeBoer had a nice run, couldn't get him over the hump there, but it's always been that model franchise of, you've got good players, you can attract good players. It's a good organization. It's a great city in California. And it really it is like, if I can use my old 4-H days, it's like a garden plot that people stopped tending, and it became overrun by weeds. And now it's gone fallow. You cannot grow anything there now until you do a complete overhaul. And I can only assume that when Mike Greer got the job there, that was his mandate. I was just looking at their the roster it's still a disaster, right? I mean, you've got Erik Karlsson under contract through 26-27 at $11.5 million. You've got Marc-Edouard Vlasic at $7 million through 25-26. People are already talking got to buy him out next summer. The Hurdle deal now doesn't seem to make any sense because you extend
it didn't
him
make any sense
at $8 million a year to this long-term
through
deal.
age 36.
To what end? And Logan Couture, $8 million through 26-27. I don't know where this team goes. Mm-hmm. They need a new arena. They're going to be some very, very tough days ahead in San Jose. And I feel bad for the fans there, but it's going to take some hard decisions. I mean, in some ways, the Brent Burns, I talked to a number of people who were like, should have traded one of the other two defensemen and kept Burns. But the problem is there isn't that market for the other two, right? There just isn't. So
you can't just wave the magic wand and make things go away. There were just too many fat contracts handed out in San Jose, period. And I know that there's always the thought, well, it's a premium because it's expensive, and they just didn't negotiate hard enough, honestly. And there was no reason to re-sign Hurdle, especially with, they didn't have a GM in place basically when they signed that deal for him. Yeah. And that's not the type of time to commit that type of money to a player when you've got hollow leadership at that moment. Okay. And that's not throwing shade at people. It's just what should have happened. Let them go. They desperately did drafts. They've look how many players that they've put in the NHL in the last 6-7 years. Hardly any. Yeah. They haven't drafted well. And I understand they haven't had draft picks, but that's not an excuse, man. Late first round picks, second round, third round. And the biggest key is once you put them in the American League, put them in a place where they can succeed. Surround them with good players and let them grow. So I don't know. My career's got a challenge on his hands. I'm excited to see where it goes because it's still a good market and a good city. And there's going to be some pain there though. And honestly, after the run they had, that's what happens. And you just got to deal with it as fans, So
yeah, I'm curious.
See, but they have 3 goalies. They have 3 goalies right now. They got to move one over, do something.
They may need more goalies. I don't know. They need a coach, and that'll be interesting too. That's true. To me, this is a perfect situation for Mike Grier to sort of step outside the box. And we saw it in Arizona with Andre Tournier coming in, Bill Armstrong making that hire, and knowing Tournier comes out of the Canadian junior program and his international experience, and my sense is very well liked there. And it has to be someone who can teach at a level that you probably shouldn't have to do as much teaching as the Sharks are going to have to do. And it's still a mess. It's contractually, they are a nightmare. That's not pretty. Yep. No. Yeah. Speaking of not pretty, Hockey Canada, it's hard to, it's sometimes easy to forget we're rolling towards the rescheduled World Junior Championships that were halted because of COVID very early in the tournament at late December, early January. It's hard to imagine this situation could get any uglier with the settlement of the sexual assault lawsuit from back in 2018 with members of the Canadian national junior team that won gold medal. Every day now we move a little bit. I don't know whether we're moving forward, but players coming out who are on that team trying to distance themselves from the assault of this young girl. 8 players involved. How do you see this? Are we at some point just going to get to, here's a list of all the players who've publicly said, I wasn't there, I'm not involved, and I, took part in any investigation and will continue to do so moving forward, so that there are only players left that we are then to assume were part of this? Or it's such an ugly situation, and there are so many ugly legs to it. I don't know where it ends, other than with a complete overhaul of Hockey Canada, which apparently it's an organization that needs that.
There's a whole lot of layers to this. And, as far as the players themselves, which, it's crazy. We're talking about the players first when there's a victim involved, right? That's first and foremost, but we are talking about hockey and ramifications and what that'll be. And, you've got three groups of players. You've got that were on this team. You've got the group of players that have already come out and said, man, I had nothing to do with this. And then you've got the group of players who had nothing to do with it, but haven't said anything.
Yeah.
Because probably out of loyalty to their teammates that they don't want to put them in that type of spot, but they're going to soon realize that you're going to need to say this or it's going to drag you around forever.
Yeah.
That they need to come clear on this. And then you got the group who were implicated, who they say, so it's process of elimination here.
Yeah.
And it's just at this stage of it, who's next, who's coming out today. Right. And that's how it's going to go. And like, I wouldn't even be surprised if those that are implicated would say, I'm cooperating with everything. I don't even know what to expect here.
Yeah.
But, the free agency thing, like, look at some of the players that haven't gotten deals, that were on that team. Like, you start to wonder if this is going to affect them, whether it is or not. So I just think that if there's anything that I really want to kind of get out there about this type of situation is that, man, I played junior, I played college. Like I've been around lots of things in this game, in this world. And I can tell you this, that if you are a young adult, a young hockey player, and if your heart rate starts to get up and you get nervous in anything that you're doing, stop doing it.
Yeah.
When it comes to this type of stuff. And when there ends up being more than one-on-one consensual anything, boy, it can get out of hand real fast for everybody and end up being a completely regrettable situation that nobody ever wanted to have happen. And that would be if I had my kids, if they're playing and older, like that's first thing I'm going to say. You can make your own choices, but do not do this. Do not get involved in this. This is not good for anybody. It never will be, no matter how in the moment it seems like a great fun idea.
Yeah.
It just doesn't end up like that, and I hope that this is yet another moment where people look around, Scott, and they realize we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
So,
I was heartened having been in Montreal at the draft and listened to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, talk, I thought, very passionately about the NHL's investigation into this and how it's not just paying lip service to wanting to appear to be interested. I think the NHL really is going to drive the bus on this. We've already seen Hockey Canada reopen the investigation. The sad part for me is I see lawyers now for the players involved who are now questioning the veracity of the victims' statements, talking about consent. And it makes me sick when I think of the dynamics of 8 players and a young woman who apparently had had a lot to drink. And this is where the lawyers are going. And I think it's shameful that that's the way that we're going down that path. I did talk to a woman from the Canadian Women's Foundation. They were one of the organizations that received some of the sponsorship money that was pulled back from the World Junior Championships. And the thing that stuck out for me, I haven't written the story yet, but she explained how this kind of incident is a trigger for lots of people who've had things like this happen to them or been victims of sexual assault and haven't come forward. So it may lead to more people, not with this specific event, but with their own personal experiences coming forward. She said, part of our problem is we don't have enough, people to answer hotlines and, help centers, all those kinds of things. But this event that gets attention like this always leads to triggers for victims who haven't been able to come forward. You just hope that maybe this helps people make a decision to come forward. Although the way it's playing out, I totally understand why so many victims of sexual assault remain silent, because it's a cesspool. And again, it just sickens me when I see the lawyers immediately casting aspersions on the victim and the veracity of it. I think that's odious. So
one of my main areas of study at school was law and economics, and took several courses in it. And I found it fascinating, but without being a lawyer, without having gone to that type of school, you learn a lot about law within the confines of that. And, these types of, whether they're civil suits, whether they're any type of investigation, like very much just turned into a big shit fight. And it's just trying to make everybody look as bad as you possibly can.
Yep.
And that's the thing, like, does anybody really want anybody publicly to know that they were involved in this? Players don't, and for a long time, it appeared there, the victim declined to be involved early on, right? For these reasons. And that's where it's just set up to fail for everybody involved.
Yeah.
Right. It feels like, it's not a clean process. It's questioning somebody's character and motivations and victim shaming beyond belief. And that's how you win court cases. And that's how you get paid as a lawyer. But it's gross, man. Like, it's not how that should be. And my line in the sand here is I just really, really hope that this starts to wake people up, man, and just realize, just don't do this.
Yeah. Be a good person.
Like, just don't do it.
No. All right, let's talk.
It's heavy, dude, but it's real.
Gotta
man.
be.
Like, that was just 2018. Like you're not going to get away from this stuff anymore. Like,
no, and again, it's a cliche, but some of what has happened here has shone such a bright light on what is clearly a morally bankrupt organization. The fact that Hockey Canada has a fund that is funded in part by registration of, if you were still in Canada playing or living and your girls were playing, some of the money that you paid to register them with Hockey Canada might have gone into a fund that was part of an out of insurance settlement for this young girl. Again, there are a lot of hard questions being asked of an organization that for years and years has really been, sort of an iconic institution in the country of Canada. And it's sad, but let's keep looking. And people who have been unable to do their jobs properly, unable to step forward, unable to do the right thing, then get out and hire people who can. And it's the cleansing is a hard part, but this is an organization that clearly needs to be cleansed. And we're in it now. And I hope the questions keep coming.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. And it's pretty amazing to think of how the similarities are between major corporations that are known polluters, that they'd rather pay the fine than they would, pay to have it taxed in first or get it. Like that was just the cost of doing business, was knowing, hey, you're going to get sued, be ready for it, have your slush fund. And you'd rather take on the lawsuits than you would do the things the right way.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time in business, especially in the States, but it's that same line of thinking.
Yep.
We've seen it in hockey that you can't just sweep things under the rug. And
nope.
Especially now, it's amazing to think that, they again, 2018, man.
Not talk. Yeah, no, that's good. All right, let's end on a more positive note.
Please.
Next week we'll wrap the season up. What are you going to do for the next week? Are you looking forward to, what are you doing vacation wise? What are you thinking about? Will we have a resolution to Kadri, Klingberg, maybe a new coach in San Jose? What are you looking forward to about the next week?
You'd have to think that those guys sign within the next week, because then you really start looking at the GMs are truly at the cottages.
They are. Yeah.
And I remember talking to Paul Maurice a couple of weeks ago on Sirius XM when I was doing it, and we were really hoping that his phone connection would stay good from his cottage, like no internet even.
Yes.
But I think those two get signed. I don't know about a coach at San Jose though. I think that might even be a quick process for my career coming in as GM. I think he may need a bit more time with that, but I'm looking forward to seeing more pictures of friends from their anniversaries, because all hockey players get married in the same month span.
Yes.
And so those anniversaries are all coming. We're seeing the engagement pictures. Tyler Seguin just was recently engaged. His pictures, were posted. And this is kind of a fun time to see your friends getting to be their true selves.
Good.
Because we're not just robots. We're not just hockey players. I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to finish this trip. We're going to go back and see, grandma and papa, and go to an amusement park, and then head back home to St. Louis for the rest of the scorching hot summer, Scott. So it'll be good, man. Are you going to stick around Atlanta? Or you got some more travel?
I got a couple of things to wrap up here, work wise. And we're getting, at some point we'll be heading back to Raleigh in August to drop our son off for round 2 at NC State. So that'll be fun, but no, very pretty low key right now, but stinking hot here. I'm trying not to move too fast. So at this stage, I feel I'm well equipped to do that. So anyway,
I could see you out ripping a jet ski. I think that's what you need. You need to buy a jet ski and just remember that video of Tampa Bay Lightning getting down to the bubble with all the dudes on the jet ski. I could see you just coming in hot.
I own a golf cart, so maybe I'll just drive around in that, get the breeze going. So anyway, travel safely, my friend. Look forward to wrapping things up next week. As always, great chatting with you, and be well.
Same to you. A yeoman's job by Scott Burnside, of course. And thanks to Leon Horban for helping us out, producing this. And we got one left. So we will talk to you all next week on the Suitcase and the Scribe.